Cowboys, not eggheads. Here we are today with my friend John Eddy. And John, Eddy, and I are going to break some precedent on Cowboys, not eggheads. John, welcome. Thank you for being on at the kind of last minute.
Thank you for having me on.
So one of the things I've always said is I don't really talk politics on this podcast. And so I actually have two other podcasts. One is a sports podcast. Another is strictly for politics. But because this is my most listened to podcast, and because this is a bipartisan issue, when was the last time we had a bipartisan issue, John Eddy?
It's not my living memory.
Yes, exactly. So it's one of those things like people have better pay attention to what's going on here. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about TikTok. Now, the reason that I ask about or banning TikTok, that's what we're going to talk about. The reason I asked John onto the podcast is because I remember sitting here one day in this very chair talking to you. It's been a couple of years.
Yeah.
But it was, I don't know how we got on the subject, John, but by the time I got done with that conversation, I made a phone call to my brother and said, get your kids off of TikTok. You scared the living bejesus out of me. And so I just thought, maybe we could have kind of a refresher of that conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, I clearly don't remember the conversation, but you do have some experiences, more than mine, in the sense that you are aware of what goes into gaming things and advertisings and so forth. So I'm just going to state from the get-go that, to me, TikTok is a national it's a Chinese national surveillance program of America. And what they are doing, there's 150 million TikTok users in America, and they're probably your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And they are gathering information. Now, we need to talk about the difference between, say, a Facebook, because I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram, and I'm on all that jazz. But the difference is, A, it's American, they're American companies, but B, to our knowledge, these other companies are not using this information. The information that they're gathering goes above and beyond the demographics of age or anything like that. They are actually, from what I understand, they are actually tracking movements, and they are hoovering, is what another my co-host of my other podcast called it. They are hoovering. In other words, they are sucking up all this information, everything like keystroke habits to what you like in music, whatever. And to me, what's happening is they are building a national profile of you. They're a human individual modeled intel profile of you. And so, I've got lots of 150 million people on TikTok. I clearly know some of those people. And most of them are younger. One of them is my guitar teacher who's been on this podcast. And he's like, I don't care. I don't care what Chinese know about me. Well, let's maybe explain to that crowd why he should care. Take it away, John. That's where I'm at.
Well, I think the one thing I'd like to do is not be hyperbolic in anything that I say.
And hopefully I wasn't. Hopefully people that know me, I'm not hyperbolic either. But I am. There's a difference between expressing concern and I'm not saying that the world is on fire or the world is ending, but we need to pay attention. So.
No, I just want to. I want to, and you're not. I just want to preface that from the beginning. Like, let's just start with the baseline facts. So, I got involved in eSports, which, even within the intelligence community within the United States, are probably fairly ignorant to what I call a cultural revolution. Right? In politics, in the past, you would have. An idea would maybe surface, right? You'd have an incredible author, like Marx or others, and it would sort of ruminate maybe in some high-level intellectual rooms and different universities. And then that idea would possibly spread into books, and people would read it, and it would maybe be translated or thought about a different way in different parts of the country or the world. And then it would, but it could take months, it could take years, it could take decades for that idea to sort of form itself. Well, with the ability of streaming, Twitch, these current platforms, you and I, when we were growing up, it was a one-way stream. We'd see the few channels that were coming in that were providing us information.
We got two that we could see the screen. A third was kind of snowy all the
you have
time.
to go change to the U channel, right?
Right.
And so
right.
we sort of are in this weird generation of we've experienced that to what it is now, and that's before we've even gotten to like the sort of just the sort of transcendent change in what technology is today. I say all that to say I got involved in esports. I had won 7 world championships and 150 individual titles with my esports team. We weren't a collaboration of billionaires. We were a group of people that wanted to be engaged in this. And I can remember going to Los Angeles and went to the Staples Center with a friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, we should get involved in esports." I'm like, "I'm not even sure what this is." And I had been involved in politics. I sort of knew different media streams, and we show up, and this stadium's totally full. And I mean, and it's an intensity that I haven't seen, even at maybe a Texas A&M football game or a Nebraska football game, but I hadn't seen that sort of intensity in an audience. And it was just incredible. I was like, wow, I was totally unaware of this, right? Just completely unaware. I'm like, wow, it's amazing how many things out there you don't know until you have the chance to experience it. So we invested in this. I went on this journey, and I didn't know any of these things. I didn't understand what Twitch was. I didn't understand how bits transacted. I didn't understand maybe the sort of the cultural norms within a generation or 2 generations beneath me and what that meant. And I found a lot of positive things. But along that way in these interactions, when you start to realize that like a League of Legends World Championship has more viewers just on stream, and there's 3 Chinese platforms that are larger than Twitch, but if you put all those together, that's a larger audience than the Super Bowl. You'd be amazed at how many senior government officials don't even understand that and don't even know what League of Legends is, right? And that's just one platform.
Well, I don't know what League of Legends is.
It's a 5-on-5 fantasy competition game, right? Where you use magic, but it takes all these variables. It takes exceptional skill to do this, right? And what's really fascinating is even some of the players have the sort of their brain elasticity is from a certain age, right? So even as they get older, just like football players are not as good. So your young age is when you kind of have this window that you're the best that you can be, as long as that platform's not changing. And popularity of games change and stuff like that. So, and I'm sure you've heard of some people like Ninja and all these others. So I say all that to say to get to TikTok is I was kind of sitting in the center of that as this is growing and people are starting to find out about it.
Sorry to interrupt. What's the time frame? We're talking a couple of years ago, 2-3 years ago?
Oh, this is like 14, 15.
Oh, 10 years ago. 9 years ago.
Yeah, okay. So now it's been quite a bit of time, but I'm sitting right at the burgeoning aspect of this. Now, video games have been popular. I've been playing Call of Duty, different things. I'd also had people that I'd worked with in government. When I worked at the Department of Justice, I worked with Ted Olliott, who was instrumental, that you probably know, worked on the Bush-Cheney campaign, but then he was chief of staff to the Attorney General of the United States Department of Justice and went on to work for Mark Zuckerberg. So initiated the IPO, was general counsel at Facebook. And then we knew Cotty Johnson, we worked with on the Bush campaign as well. And, he had a very talented, very smart guy, went and joined this, video game company as a mid-level manager. I'm like, why would he go work at a video game company? Of all the things he could go do,
right.
Such a talented person, why would he go do that? And he worked his way up and took a $7 billion asset and turned it into a $65 billion asset at one time at Activision Blizzard. So I kind of had friends that were kind of tangentially connected to me. So I was hearing these things, but I wasn't living in it. And so when I got into esports, I was starting to live in it. And it struck me very early on as being in politics, we know how to run campaigns and run ads in order to influence how someone thinks about somebody else, right? It doesn't matter what political party you're in. It's what you sort of learn. It's the information you put out. We know why negative information works because it affects a certain part of the brain. And so,
in my career, that's dramatically climbed. I mean, when I first started, you targeted people based on where they live geographically, which by the Bush campaign of 2004, which we were involved in, it was much more detailed than that. It was now based on behaviors and consumer lists and all this information, where we're compiling information about where we believe someone will behave based on their consuming habits or based on who they are, or it's not necessarily where they live. So all these, and it continues to evolve. I mean, I've been retired for 2 years, and it's evolved in the last 2 years, so it continues to grow.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, digital advertising is a big part of that as well. Um, Sorry to interrupt.
No, so I think
All this stuff is moving really quick. I mean,
oh yeah, and so I'm now sitting outside of politics, if you will. Right, I still have political interests. I'm still engaged as an activist or as a donor or whatever that might be towards things that I care about. But I have friends that are on the other side. Right, I'm talking about American politics in general. But what I quickly came to see was, if you're going to go out, and the reason I found it interesting from an anthropological aspect, right, which is maybe at the base of who I am, is why I went into politics. Like, I love learning about people. Why do they act a certain way? I saw major business movements being made in order to affect what the sort of thing that person is seeing, or how quickly that idea could spread. So one example before we even get to TikTok, when BLM first came onto the scene, and whether you agree with BLM or you don't, Call of Duty, which is a large platform, was having billions of impressions a day. So I want you to think about your 7-year-olds, right? That some parent lets their child play a first person shooter game at that age. Which, trust me, there's a lot on there because I still play, and I load into a lobby and I hear them. So let's just get past the parents shouldn't let them on thing. It's a reality they're on.
yeah,
And that doesn't even include the mobile app, right? Which also has a lot of players. But then you kind of have that, and I'm listening to, and seeing that I'm seeing the information that they're absorbing, and I'm looking at it through a political lens, right? And so there's messaging related to BLM. And one of the people's quotes that they put up was a woman that was engaged in activism and violent activism against the federal government. I'm like, wow, that's really fascinating. Like, take off the political aspects of whether it's right or wrong, but these are what kids are absorbing. And they're getting that in every load screen every time they're going into a new lobby. So they lose, they go into a new lobby, they're getting this. So we're talking billions of impressions, not just here in America, but across the globe, right? Across the globe, on a scale that's probably inconceivable to a lot of people. Imagine watching Super Bowl ads and everyone talks about it. That's what gaming is. That's how large it is in the impressions that you're getting. So I saw that going on. So I'm like, wow, that's fascinating. I can see how this singular idea can quickly spread and become almost culturally accepted in a cultural norm because, gosh, these people are saying it. I'm hearing people talk about it. I'm kind of adopting what that is because I'm engaged in these things. So I saw that happening. But then what really became sort of concerning to me is I saw large global corporations starting to purchase certain gaming companies or whatever it might be. And not that the current American companies, weren't using that data, but it really struck me that when China shut down Twitch many years ago, and if you went and talked to most senators, congressional people, even intelligence people, they were acutely unaware. The reason I know that is because I said, hey, do you realize this happened X period of time? I know some CIA advisors, different people. We know senior people as we get older, our friends become more senior people in these positions. And like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, what's League of Legends? And I'm like, you didn't hear, China shut down one of the major American platforms where kids communicate, they acculturate. And you have to understand, within this generation, the reason I brought up a TV is they're used to doing this. If they ask a question and you don't respond, even from a marketing standpoint, then they're not going to believe you. They're not going to think you're authentic. They expect to be able to have an interaction back and forth in any of their communication. So that goes for TikTok. That goes for these live streams, right? And if you're not doing those things, if it's static, they're like, hold on. Like, this feels like a madman thing. I'm being marketed to by Coca-Cola, right? Like, I want to know what's in Coca-Cola. Why should I be drinking that? And I think you even saw that within BLM, right? I always say, I think this is a really exceptional generation that's coming up because they really are trying to seek truth. And it's sort of our moral responsibility to step into those things and help provide that truth, or at least what we think is a truth.
Well, give them some tools to how to discover the truth.
Yeah, 100%.
So they can figure it out on their own. Yeah.
And so what they, even when it comes to like, you hear a lot of people attacking the founding fathers. They're like, wait, hold on real quick. So there's a whole bunch of white men, right, that were part of colonialism that had slaves. So why are we trusting these documents? So it's what every young person does, but it's at a much faster pace than would have happened in the past, right? And so I had great, wonderful experiences and great conversations with people regarding this. I think you also run into people you don't like, especially being online and being engaged in these games, just like you would in any normal society. But I found that most of these kids were good kids, and most of them were very interested in American culture and freedom and fighting for those things, even over in China. So what I saw with China shutting that down is I saw them saying, this must be a risk, right, to what we're trying to control, so we're going to shut it down. The reason I bring that up is because this is before TikTok had even really sort of had its ascendancy in the U.S. And then I started to look at how that was programmed. So even recently, the CEO was very well spoken in front of Congress, this last week. And I've seen both the bills that are being put forward in the Senate.
I don't think he was, but good for you. I guess you watched the whole hearing.
No, I mean, in the sense that he's answering appropriately. He seems very kind. Oh, well, we're happy to sell, our company to an American company. There's no way we're sharing data.
Yeah.
Move past all that, right? Let's get rid of like the black ops stuff. Let's just look at how they're forward-facing certain content and the algorithms that they're putting forward and what they're supporting. So, it's kind of like your parents used to say, you are who you hang out with, right? If you're hanging out with all your buddies that are getting in trouble and they're doing lots of drugs and different stuff, guess what? Even if you're a pretty good person, you're going to get into a situation you probably didn't want to be in, even if you're not even doing the drugs. And that's kind of the same way with some of these streams, right? And what's being targeted specifically is it exceptional violence? Is it kind of disjointing culture? Is it dislocating culture, right? For like, oh my gosh, I have this certain view of these people. And so those things can be tweaked, and they're very, very powerful because it's the amount of images and things that are coming through that you're absorbing that is a problem. So to say early on, well, we're really not interested, I think that's disingenuous at best, right? He comes across very well, all these kind of things. But there's sort of what I would consider a cultural revolution that's going on. There's an East-West divide. And TikTok is a platform that they worked very hard on in order to gain popularity.
They being China.
China, yeah, without a doubt. To pretend, like I can remember with my esports guys, I'd go to CES, right, in Vegas. And I can remember we were walking by the Yahweh booth. And it was this gorgeous booth. And they were sort of showing some of the security measures they had, facial intelligence, all this stuff. So there's sort of this escalation even within the corporate world of who's going to control that market share, because whoever controls market share controls the sort of ideas that you're going to be putting forward, right? And so there is a communication sort of war and a war of ideas that are happening. But when I went by that Yahweh, like, I was scared, right? Like they were able to pull up just me walking by a booth 100 yards away with facial recognition. This is years ago. Who I was, what my entire social profile was. It scared the crap out of me.
What right? Kind of food you just bought at the grocery store or whatever?
100%. And they were sitting there very kindly, right? Like, oh, look at this incredible stuff that we're doing. But I knew from being in government and being in some of the things that I've been in, I'm like, this is a military-backed sort of situation, just like it would be if it was Chinese coming over here, and Raytheon had this special kind of thing. We're like, well, aren't you originally a defense intelligence group, or kind of related to the defense intelligence or defense industry? So, you can see these things happening, and most people can. So, I mean, it should be a concern to us. But what's really concerning is their ability to track keystrokes, these very small things of data that they're collecting, and they're saying, hey, we haven't harvested that. It doesn't matter, right?
So okay, fine. But but they can harvest that. Maybe they haven't, but they have the ability to do it. And I'm not going to be so naive to say that they haven't. Maybe not on everybody, but on people they want to influence, for instance. And so let's strip this down, John. Why would they
I poured a drink for you, Sam, too. This is a little Tito's and tonic for you. Yeah.
Outstanding. Why would they I guess my question is, just dumbing this down for Joe Q, 7th grade, is 7-year-old. I mean, why would they what could they do with this information? What, in real terms? For instance, what if they knew every little quirk of a former I'm trying to think here. Say Dan Quayle. Let's take Dan Quayle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's favorite vice president. What if they knew every little thing about Dan Quayle? Everything.
He's a good person, by the way.
He is. He's a great guy. He's a great guy. But let's talk about in terms of national security. I mean, he's been off the scene for many years.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's in his 70s now. I think he plays golf with Alice Cooper every day.
Yeah. That's true.
I mean, it's true. But what if the Chinese had all this information on Dan Quayle?
Mm-hmm.
Now, Dan Quayle doesn't have Secret Service protection or any of that stuff anymore, right? So what if they had? So what are the implications of that, John Eddy?
Social and economic control. Okay, and here's what I mean by that. So when we were in these leagues, one of the top video games platforms that we competed on and that we were one of the top in the world on was purchased by a Chinese company, right? So now I'm not reporting to a group of local American programmers and guys that I've known for a decade, and it's kind of the team owners, and we all kind of know each other. Now we have a corporate entity that's above us that's Chinese owned. And, they might say, hey, we need to be careful about what, and you've seen this within the NBA, right? You've seen the NBA players be real quiet about saying anything negative about China. Why is that? Because one of the largest expansion opportunities from an economic standpoint is in China. They're opening up massive amount of stadiums. Old players who can't even play in the NBA anymore, right? Like Stephon Mayberry and stuff have gone over there and are considered legends, and they're making a ton of money. And it's the same economic situation we face. I hadn't worked in government in 15 years, and when I got done with this, I went to work with Governor Hutchinson here in Arkansas. And I'd known him going all the way back to the Bush administration. Very good governor, very good person, by the way. Contemplating thinking about running for president. He would be someone that you would want in there because he's very thoughtful and he's seen damn near everything. But, we would have a conference call because as a senior economic advisor, we'd have conference calls with the Chinese ambassador, who's now the Chinese foreign minister. So he's kind of number 2, number 3. And you're in this very difficult position of our economies through globalization have become so integrated that even if there was some major conflict or break, right, it would take a company like Walmart 6 years to onshore everything back here, okay? And that doesn't even indicate the amount of inflation that we'd have to go through because you're paying a very cheap price for something because it's being developed somewhere else at a very low cost. And so you're kind of you've been playing this dancing game, and that was the same within esports, right? Now you kind of have a Chinese ownership. They might be wanting you to say or do certain things. So that economic and social control matters. Why? So you can go to China. What are they doing right now? Well, they've moved to digital currencies. Well, gosh, I've seen digital currencies with bits, and that's kind of how kids transact and stuff. But what if you're taking your phone and you need to get on the subway that day? Gosh, why is my card not working? Well, I just found out my social score says I have been saying negative things about the government, so the government is now restricting my ability to even hold my own money, which technically means you don't have your own money, and it's restricting your ability to go do what you want to do, right? And that's not being hyperbolic, it's just what's happening. And so that's the concern even long term. Let's say I was interested in keeping our esports team and stuff. I had a Chinese top-down government saying, well, maybe you shouldn't. And these are all things that can't get related into an ESPN article. You can't get in because you have to be very careful about libel because then they can sue you through a legal system saying, well, you're saying this about us. That's not true. I'm just putting forward all the facts of what that social control is and that economic control and why that matters. Why does that matter? Because just like why we care whether the Saudis are doing oil trades in the dollar or doing it in the yuan totally matters, right? Because that's sort of the financial backing that gives you power to determine which ways things are going. And those things matter, and all that's being dislocated, even as we speak right now. So it's a fight for that social and economic control. And it's a very potent tool because if I can get to young minds and I can kind of control them and get them to sort of accept certain social behaviors or sort of accept certain things, then I'm going to be able to do what I want to do, especially within a totalitarian nature sort of system. So that's difficult. And then if you're here in America, right, like Arkansas cares about selling rice to China. That's one of our main crops here in Arkansas. Same like with a place like Nebraska. And those have sometimes been very good relationships in the past. But as these things are developing, and we haven't even gotten to AI, there is going to be continued conflict. And it's not something that we're necessarily driving. It's something that is just coming out of power and the ebb and flow of economic competition and challenge that's happened throughout history.
Boy, that's a lot of egghead information there, John Eddy. You
I'm trying to
a lot of 25-cent words out there, buddy.
Well, I could go deeper, Sam.
Please don't. Well, back to TikTok. To your knowledge, you have 3 daughters, right?
Yeah.
Do they have TikTok on their phone? Yes or no?
I didn't allow them to put TikTok on their phone.
Why?
Because I was concerned.
You're talking to parents, so
Yeah.
Let's bring it down for us Cowboys out here. You're talking to a bunch of Cowboys.
There's a lot of different. This had nothing to do with even like the social aspects, right? Like they're seeing images and stuff that I don't think they're ready for, all that kind of stuff that we as parents, that's generally what we're worried about, right? Conversations going on, sexualization, all the things that are happening within these platforms that are very powerful. Mine was, I was worried, we have interconnected, my Apple's connected to my Google. I had to log on to Google Chrome for this, but then I have to download it, and now that's in my apps. And then it locks up, oh, you've been looking at these websites. Oh, you should connect these apps. Oh, here's your Apple Pay. It's connected too. So all these things are connected. And what I worry about is some device or something like, hey, Dad, I need to pay for my college stuff. Well, gosh, she used the same password for her college payment as she did for her email. And then they can get into your email and they can start to scan your emails and do different things like that. It's being overly paranoid, but when I've seen a group of people do certain things within their society, it's not that paranoid, right? And that's a hard thing.
They have the time, the money, and the labor to do all these things.
They have entire, and I know this to be true, right? Because I've worked within this space, especially on the tech side, they have entire buildings that are full. And you can see hacking ramp up when people come in at 9 a.m. and it goes back down at 5 p.m., just like you're on the clock coming from China time. Same thing happens in Russia, right? And organized crime within some of these things are state-sponsored. Same with Iran. And because it's so dispersed and there's a sort of this axis of different people that feel very differently than we do about human rights and other things, they're trying to take advantage of that. There's already a silent war that's sort of going on with this stuff. And like I said, if I can influence kids and be in that world and I can kind of influence that, of course I'm going to, right? Because I'm normalizing it, and then I can control what they're seeing, the algorithms that they see, and I can create, honestly, like one of my gravest fears right now is this idea that we hate each other, right? Like all you hear in America is Donald Trump versus Joe Biden. And this guy is the worst devil in the world. The reality is these two guys have a lot more in common than some of our adversaries, yet we don't focus on that like at all. And that's what's really concerning to me.
It's encouraging to me that is it fair to say that it's a bipartisan effort right now to ban TikTok in Congress? I mean,
on the Senate side, yes.
So thank you, TikTok. At least you brought us together that way.
Well, on the Senate side, yes, but unfortunately and this goes towards money and politics, and Sam and I both understand this greatly. McCain, to his credit, no matter what you think of him, was trying to come up with a solution to fix what he saw was this inundation of money that was just going to corrupt DC. Not that it wasn't already have corruption, and throughout history you're going to have corruption. So like I don't live in this kind of delusional world that like everything's going to be a utopia, right? Like I'm a conservative because I always jokingly say we don't really progress past anything, right? Like I'm trying to conserve the decent values that we have that keep us strong and that people have fought for and bled for. And that doesn't matter if both Republicans and Democrats have done that. You know what I mean? Like my grandmother from Grand Island and a person who led my faith life, Father Tom Dowd, who's also from Grand Island, Nebraska, were both staunch Democrats and liberal Democrats, right? I love those people. Those were good people. So those aren't my enemy, right? We have different views even on abortion, but like generally those are not my enemies. And that's what's been hard for me. These other people, if you were to say something like what we're saying right now, we could be jailed tomorrow. And I think you see a lot of people that have lived under those totalitarian regimes, communist regimes, come here from Cuba, and they're like, whoa, y'all. I mean, I've talked to a lot of Polish friends who lived under communism that are around our age, right? So they were still under Soviet rule, in the 90s before the wall came down. And they're like, right. John, the stuff I'm seeing scares the heck out of me. And I'm worried about our government, but I'm also worried about, what's coming our way, right? And these alliances of people that go kill reporters and do different things. And so it's hard when you work in government because sometimes you have to go meet with these people and you have to break bread with people you don't like, right? Because you're trying to keep a world system generally in a good spot, and that like criminals are being prosecuted and different stuff, and the world's becoming more and more integrated. And then you have on top of that, you have AI coming in. One of the things I say about AI is like, forget what it is. Does it think?
AI is artificial intelligence.
Artificial intelligence.
For all you cowboys out there.
Think about it as like
all these acronyms.
High-powered computers, right? But something is, it's, I always jokingly say, and Elon Musk, I think, is correct about this, and I've read the books that he's suggested people read that kind of help me understand this. Imagine a Manhattan Project going on right now. And instead of being a tight core, because you realize how powerful and dangerous this is if you harness fusion and nuclear power. And imagine, well, no, now we're just going to let everyone be engaged in it and have hands into it and do whatever they want with it, right? That's why Elon Musk is like, hold on, we need to have a moratorium. Like, this is going to advance. And people kind of get into like, oh, it's going to be like a Terminator is going to come get us. No, it's more like this. Imagine 254-bit encryption being taken down tomorrow by a group of people, and they totally destroy the banks overnight, right? Because they're moving money around, and that's how powerful this is. So even the sort of structures that we need to work well, that protect all of us, that work in a integrated fabric of society, can be torn down instantaneously. So it's like a nuclear bomb going off. That's why these things are
you want to start
dangerous.
A war, take away everybody's everything that they've got in the bank, and take away their electricity.
Yeah. I mean,
and
even
both
SPV,
of those things are pretty easily done if you've got the technological prowess to do that, and they do.
Yeah,
right.
And that's just one small snippet of a larger aspect of how, and it's why you see, I think, a lot of top business people fighting with all the money that they have to try and control this thing. It's not like I don't believe that like Bill Gates or anything are trying to create some evil sort of empire. It's just they're seeing that that's going to completely fundamentally shift how businesses work and everything. So you better figure that out, because the first to market and first to be able to figure that out is going to win the game. And that's how capitalism has always worked.
Okay. So what are 4 things that parents can do for their kids, or ought to be concerned about, or 4 action items they can take that you would recommend? Like, I wouldn't buy Bitcoin. I don't know if you've ever had Bitcoin, my friend, but I don't know anything about it. I would not mess around with Bitcoin, number one.
Yeah.
Any digital currency, I wouldn't mess with it.
Yeah.
Number 2, change your passwords. It's a pain in the rear end, but you should not. And I'm, maybe I'm guilty of this, China. Maybe I'm not. But you should change up your passwords for everything that you've got. The problem is we all have 150 passwords, but there are vaults that you can go to blah, 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 blah. Number 3, get the hell off of TikTok. Get it off your phone, get it off your computer, whatever. Should we disconnect from any other social media outlets?
Yeah, it's I always say,
am I being a hypocrite by saying, well, I'm going to keep my Facebook, it's fine, but TikTok, there's no way I'm going to disconnect that.
No, I think you need to be careful about what you share, right? The sad thing is these platforms early on, it was a wonderful way for us to stay engaged with each other.
Communication, yeah.
And
it's people, I was just thinking about that, John. People years ago, I don't know, do you do a Christmas card? Years ago, it was a thing. You did a Christmas card. That's how you learned what people did in the last year or what they've been up to or whatever. Don't need that anymore because it's all, go on Facebook and you can catch up real quick.
Yeah.
Right?
I think a lot of these things are helpful. I'm not a doomsday person that like it's all going to end or whatever, but I think you have to be careful about what you post that's saved forever. You have to explain that to your children. Especially with Snapchat, and it's hard. Like, I have teenagers, I know you know this too. You become socially isolated if you're not on these platforms. I can remember one time I wouldn't even let my kids on any sort of social media site till they're at least 14, and even then it was very limited. Right, I had all the limits on it and stuff like that, but it really was pressure on me because they're like, Dad, I'm like, what are you doing this weekend? Right, where we would ride our bikes and be like, hey, let's go meet at the movie theater. Right. These kids, this generation doesn't do that, or if they do, that communication pattern wasn't via like a phone like we would do, right? It's via a Snapchat or whatever it might be.
I had to freaking crank that phone, man.
Yeah, that's right. So the problem is you get isolated. You get socially isolated because, I'll be like, hey, what are you doing? Well, I don't know, because I'm not in those conversations, right? So this huge pull to be, you get pulled in whether you want to be or not, because otherwise, well, gosh, Vika's not on, so she's not coming. And then all of a sudden you're not invited to the birthday party. You're not going to the movies, all these kind of things.
And all of a sudden your self-esteem suffers. I mean, what a mess.
Well, here's the other thing too, right? Like where we had that need to meet physically together and to have that interaction, even the dating world is different in the sense of,
oh my God, I can't imagine.
Well, I'll be like, hey, do you want to go have a slumber party? And my daughter's like, well, why? I'm like, because I mean, don't you want to like see each other? She's like, well, Dad, I'm talking to everyone right here. Like we're sending photos, right? Here's my snap. I've snapped this person 15 times of my, duck face or whatever it is. And so I think that's hard. So the first thing I would say is you need to visibly and socially engage with what platforms they're on and understand what they are. So that's what I mean about the moral responsibility of like, you have to get on these things. You have to understand what it is.
And work them. Yeah.
And work them. And be able to check and say, you have an open phone policy, all those things, right? And there's
how do you communicate? I'm sorry to interrupt, but how do you communicate with your kids right now?
Usually via just text message.
Text, okay.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm
not sending snaps.
There's certain groups of people that it's like I find myself involved in all these platforms because there are a certain amount of people that I can only get on Twitter.
Yeah.
And there are a certain amount of people, most of the people are Facebook. We old people are Facebookers.
100%.
Instagram more so though, and I'm actually gravitating more and more to Instagram. I don't know why. Well, I don't know why. I just am. And so there's all these. It's like it's confusing. Like which vehicle do I need to use? I mean, nobody calls anybody anymore. I mean, my brother has a rule with his kids. Like if I am calling, you are going to answer the phone right now.
Yeah.
Right now. and I mean, like that's like unusual or something. Like it's like you have to. Nobody picks up the phone anymore. You can't call anybody. I mean, you have to freaking have a text. It drives me nuts. You have to text someone to set up a phone conversation. Why did the time it is spent to freaking text me? Just call me. I mean, I'll pick it up. Well,
it kind of like just from an adult perspective, it blows my mind how many interactions I have with children when I'm playing, say, Call of Duty. Like I really enjoy playing Call of Duty. I've been a big fan of it. I've played it for a long time. I believe
now you're in your what? You're younger than me. What, you're in your mid-40s. Yeah, you're younger than me.
But that's like how I kind of relax and it's enjoyable, and I enjoy how they program the game. Like there's other reasons, like I'm just really fascinated by it. But the thing is, it's mind-boggling to me the young children that I can talk to. No one knows who I am. Right? I could be anybody. And I have the ability to get their phone number, to access who they are. And this, when kids are 12, 13, 14, they're confused about who they are. Or they're even like, hey, you're a dummy. You always are you're always on my butt. They're like, here's somebody else that's going to give me some other attention.
This is open ripe day for predators, man.
No, I mean, you couldn't do that when we were kids, right?
No.
Like, there's no way someone's calling on the house phone. If the house phone rang, everyone picked it up, remember? So it's like, so those.
Well, hell, our whole neighborhood might have picked it up because we're on the party line. If they thought it was, we were two short rings and the neighbor thought it was one short ring, they picked it up. I mean, it was a different time.
Yeah, and I think some of the mental illness, some of the things that we're seeing right now is more than just video games. I think it's the social isolation. It's the dopamine reaction that we're getting from constantly sliding.
The instant dopamine hit, and I'm an adult, and I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, for God's sakes. I'll post something. I'll go back an hour later. I'm like, oh, I wonder who saw that. Like, who gives a shit?
Yeah, these programs.
Apparently I do, but I do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm hooked. So, and I'm an adult, but so imagine if you're younger, what that's all about. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I have hope. I think, as you mentioned earlier, kids are trying to figure out what the truth is, and they will find it. We're resilient people.
Well, I think I said this to you before. I've run into adults who are like, I don't get this. So you're telling me on Twitch, a kid will just like give money to like a content creator they don't even know, like they just donate money to them. And I'm like, yeah, like why is that so weird? Like, I just don't get that. Why would you just give free money to some random person? And I said, well, I love analogies, right? I love analogies. And I said, Well, do you remember back in 30 years ago when you're sitting with your parents and you're watching that amazing lion documentary on PBS, or you're watching Downton Abbey or whatever it is, and the PBS guy comes up and says, "Hey, if you give $25, you get these 3 CDs of the entire collection of the Lion series." And like, "Oh yeah, I'll call and give $25. Plus, it's helping public broadcasting, which has Sesame Street. Like that seems like a good thing." And so you donated for content, right? So these are just different evolutions of how kids are transacting both socially and economically. But I have found, there are some social changes. One of the main examples is the fact that kids will, especially what I consider like 27 and under, so really real Gen Z, really 24 and under, especially now too, this real Gen Z generation, they're spending more of their disposable income on those types of things. And then you have what I would consider baby millennials, not what we call the retirement age millennials, which is closer to us. But
I'm a Gen X, pal. I'm not a millennial.
I am too.
I'm a Generation Xer.
But there's kind of like that large gap in millennials, right? Where when I came into college was the very first time they had email, right? So that was the very first time there's some sort of digital electronic.
Yeah, well, you are younger than me. Yeah.
And you had to get it, right? Like you couldn't register for class until you got your email. And so I remember, like, gosh, I got to go to this computer.
Well, I stood in line in Nebraska Student Union ballroom for 3 hours to register for classes.
That's right. So there was
no email.
So I think you got they're spending more of their disposable income. You have a generation that is highly in debt, because our government has spent so much. And they've spent so many dollars, and we have a real debt crisis. It's making it, it's caused inflation. And guess what? This next generation down can't afford homes. They're not making enough money in order to go put a down payment under the current credit system that we have in order to get a loan and to buy a house. And so, some of the things they're realizing, the reason they're moving to a more rental society is they're like, well, gosh, I can't afford this. So what am I going to spend money on that gives me fulfillment? So they're much more attuned with spending their disposable income towards things that they enjoy. And the things that they enjoy are the screen that they've had, that they're socially acculturated to like what that screen is and what they're using. Right. So they're very sophisticated and much more sophisticated than you. And so there is a large learning curve, and it's still hard for me. And I've been at the center of this. But I do believe in this generation, and I believe we have to engage on it both socially and culturally and politically, because there is sort of what I would consider an idea war that's going on already. And I think you're ignorant if you're pretending we're going to just somehow come out of this conflict somewhere down the road. I think just throughout history, we've had this incredible lucky time of a lot of this peace dividend that we've lived in. And at no time in history have we ever had this amount of time where people aren't going off and dying in wars, right? But unfortunately, I think conflict is going to continue to come, whether we want to or not, because people can be greedy and selfish. And, you have to engage on this stuff because it's about winning minds, right? Like it's about helping people realize freedom and being a decent person, and those things matter, and engage on it. Otherwise, you're ceding the ground to people like, well, you can just be okay with the government totally controlling your movements and where you live and lock you up. And no, you can't take a bus because you said one sort of weird thing about the government. So now you're not allowed to do anything. Like that's very scary to me.
Yeah. I mean, heck, my GPS knows where I'm going to go every day at 11 o'clock. It gives me directions to my gym.
Yeah, I mean,
so imagine what the Chinese are going to do with that kind of information. I mean,
yeah, you're creatures of habit. Plus, there's a typical cloak and dagger stuff, right? Like blackmail. If I can figure out that, he's going to this house, or I mean, that's getting way down in the weeds. But yeah, it's a total problem. And
it's going to take a bunch of, like I said, it's going to take a bunch of everybody in this America. If they had their bank account drained overnight and electricity went off, how do you think people would react, my friend?
Oh, it'd be bad.
Not well. None of us would.
I mean,
I can't charge my phone. I mean.
Or if you remember that little sort of revolution they had in Egypt, everyone's like, well, it's a Muslim Brotherhood trying to take over. I said, no, that's all about bread prices getting too high, right? Like that's your normal person. Like I can't go buy bread. Like what's going on? Yeah. And, I think people forget we've been so fortunate to live in such an incredible structure. We've had generally, most of our politicians, most of the people we live with be good, decent people. And you kind of see that fraying at the edges right now, which is sad to me. But, we've lived in this incredible world, but, it's very fragile. It's exceptionally fragile.
Very fragile.
And that's why even like a January 6th and stuff, no matter how you feel about it, that's it's scary.
Well, it's the day that I left Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I haven't looked back.
Yeah, I think a lot of people.
Yeah. John, I think we're gonna stop right there. That's a lot of information for people to digest, brother. I mean, holy Toledo. It was about much more than TikTok, but so what I'm hearing from you is, because you're on TikTok doesn't mean the world's going to end, but you might want to know what it's all about. And it's a lot more than even smart people know.
Yeah. and it's going to socially adjust your behaviors. And so what are you exposing your mind to? Just like anything else, pornography, alcohol, what are you exposing your body and your mind to on a daily basis? And is it overconsumption? And is it starting to affect how you feel about yourself and even how you view the world, right?
Get outside, man.
Yeah. Like
get outside, breathe the air, watch the sunset. I'm starting to sound like an old man, but I mean, when's last? I mean, my sister-in-law, every morning she gets up and watches the sunrise, and when it's nice out, she'll do what she calls earthing, and that is she'll put her bare feet into the lawn.
I've totally heard that.
Don't knock it till you try it.
That's right.
And so you got to strip all that stuff. I mean, you got to clean up some minds out there, man. Everybody's got to clear their mind. There's too much garbage in it. But
yeah, and that just generally your neighbors are good people, and they're not your enemy, especially here in the United States. Yeah. Like that's the biggest thing that I.
Well, if you want to unite us, Saudi Arabia and China, I don't know if you saw what happened yesterday, but Saudi Arabia and China and Russia, if you want to unite us, careful.
Yeah.
Because if we're united, we will crush you. So.
Yeah. And even with all now
that was bravado. What did you say we were going to do? Hyperbole. That was hyperbole. But I believe it, and so do you.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm passionate about it. I think these kids are good kids. That's the other thing I tell adults. And actually, Governor Hutchinson had an ideas conference. We had Condoleezza Rice come, and she kind of said something. She's at Stanford now, and she's in the waning aspects of her career and even intellectual work. And she just said, it's invigorating to, no matter what you think or you see all these horrible things about universities and stuff. It's like there's really good kids there, and they're just learning, and they're going to make mistakes.
There are good kids at universities, and there are good politicians still. And they're at the end of the day, there is, like Mr. Rogers said, when you're in trouble, look for the helpers. They're out there.
Yeah, they're out there. And so I feel that way about these kids, even with all this stuff. That's the number one takeaway I had, was how incredible these kids were and how really knowledgeable they were on multiple fronts. So it's not an end of the world situation. It's just being completely aware of sort of the global aspects of what this is and just protecting yourself. Don't put things on there and don't expose yourself. There's no reason to. And that's not what companies want, right? They want as many users as possible because it drives valuation and what they can sell you. But you got to get off of it.
Well, rich isn't always about money, my friend. So there you go.
That's right. I've learned that at this age, 1,000%.
That's a damn thing to me. John, I appreciate your time, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Sam.
You bet.